AITA for how I reacted when the daughter I raised alone uninvited me 2 hours before graduation. I was already in the auditorium, so I stayed. When she arrived, she came with her mother and her stepfather. I still remember the sound of the front door slamming that morning, like a gavel announcing the end of a trial I had not even realized was taking place. My daughter Kelsey was 6 years old. Her cereal remained untouched on the table, the milk getting warm in her favorite cartoon bowl. Her mother did not say goodbye. No explanation, just the sound of her suitcase rolling across the linoleum floor. And then that final echo. I did not cry right away. I did not scream. I cleaned up the cereal. I packed Kelsey's lunch. I brushed her hair and took her to school as if nothing had happened. That is how it starts. You know, single fatherhood is not a noble statement. It is a silent decision to keep going when the world gives you no other choices. And so I kept going for 17 years. In those early days, I barely slept. My job at the local auto repair shop paid just enough to cover rent, food, and the occasional emergency. Kelsey would sit on a milk crate in the corner of the garage after school, swinging her legs, reading books well above her age level while I changed oil and rotated tires. She never complained once. On the contrary, she seemed to guess the weight I was carrying and tried to make herself lighter. She would draw me pictures, stick figures of me fixing cars, and her holding a huge wrench by my side. "We are a team, Dad," she would often say, and we were. Her mother called from time to time, always from a new city, almost always during the holidays. Kelsey would smile hearing the tone and then cry when the call ended. I never spoke ill of her mother. I never told her about the betrayals in our marriage, nor the time I discovered a secret bank account with thousands of dollars she was taking from our shared finances while I was working overtime. I let Kelsey build her own truth about her mom because I believed children should not carry their parents' bitterness. Now, I see that perhaps that was my first mistake. Raising her was never easy, but it was always sacred to me. I attended all her school plays, even the ones where she was just a tree in the background. I learned to braid her hair with online tutorials. Once, I spent the whole night sewing a costume for the 5th grade Halloween parade because she wanted to be a robot unicorn princess. And as she grew older and questions arose about periods, boys, and broken friendships, I stumbled over my words. But I was there. I let her talk. I listened. And during those nights when she could not sleep, when anxiety made her shake and cry, I would sit on the edge of her bed, rubbing her back until her breathing calmed down. "I have got you, baby," I would whisper. Always became our catchphrase. She would sometimes say it back to me with her little broken voice. There were always moments, even years, when I thought I had done something close to the right thing. When she was accepted into that advanced gifted program, the one where she had to take a 2-hour round-trip school bus ride each day, I told her, "Do not worry about the cost." I took on extra shifts, sold my old motorcycle, clipped coupons, and stopped buying coffee. And when the college admission letters arrived, I watched her open them with tears in her eyes. She was going to be the first in the family to get a degree. She chose an out-of-state university, prestigious and expensive. And even though it broke my heart, I encouraged her. "Fly high," I told her. "But remember who packed your parachute." The calls became less frequent after that. First weekly, then monthly. By her junior year, I almost only heard from her when she needed something. A book, emergency rent, a deposit to study abroad. I did not complain. I simply transferred the money and told myself it was part of letting her go. But deep down, something had changed. Her tone had grown distant. She started calling her mother Mom, again without hesitation, without the caution she used before. She began mentioning her stepfather Scott, a name that had never crossed her lips before, as if little by little, he had taken a place that previously belonged to me. I told myself it was fine, that it was part of growing up, that love does not always look like gratitude. But still, every time the call ended with a "thank God" instead of an "I love you," something inside me broke a little. I had planned her graduation day for months. I asked for time off work. I booked a hotel. I even bought a suit. My first new one in over a decade. I was proud, not of myself, but of her, of us. I wrote a speech I was never going to read, imagining she would laugh at my dad jokes and cry when I quoted that old word, always. I even went further and prepared a surprise for her, a full scholarship I had privately secured for her master's degree. Something I could barely afford, but I did it by selling my late father's watch collection. That part hurt, but I knew it would open doors for her. I wanted to give her something grand, permanent, unforgettable, and I succeeded, except not in the way I had hoped. On the morning of the graduation, I ironed my shirt 3 times. My hands would not stop shaking. I arrived early at the auditorium. I found my seat and struck up nervous conversations with other parents. I remember a woman next to me saying, "You must be very proud of your daughter." I smiled and replied, "I raised her alone." The woman patted my arm and said, "Well, you must have done an incredible job." My chest swelled. I took out my phone to check on her, and right then her message arrived. "Hi, Dad. The rules changed. They are not letting parents in anymore. Sorry." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she had sent it to someone else. But looking around, the other parents kept walking in, greeted by smiling volunteers. I frowned and stood up. That is when I saw her, Kelsey, coming through the side door in her cap and gown. Her smile was wide, radiant. On her left, her mother, elegant, as always, in a cream-colored dress. On her right, a tall man in a suit holding her by the arm, as if it were his rightful place. They looked like the perfect family. My heart pounded. I took an instinctive step forward, half raising my hand to wave, to call out to her, but she saw me first. Her face changed. She pulled away from them and walked toward me, her expression hardening with every step. "You are too stubborn," she whispered furiously to me. "Why are you here?" And then louder, with a fake laugh for her mother and stepfather. "This is my happy day, and I only want to be with the people I love." That moment stretched on forever. The breath was knocked out of me. My feet felt nailed to the floor. I truly looked at her, and I no longer saw the little girl in the unicorn costume, nor the teenager clinging to me during panic attacks. I saw a stranger, a woman who had rewritten our history without me in it. So I smiled. A soft, sad smile, and I left. The air outside the auditorium felt thicker than it should on a spring morning. I remember how the sun hit the pavement, how the laughter of other families bounced off the stone walls, completely indifferent to what had just broken inside me. I did not rush. I walked slowly, measuring my steps, making sure my legs would not give out under the weight of what had just happened. It was not just the humiliation, though God knows that was enough. It was the silent death of something sacred. I was never a perfect father, but I was always there. Always. Through every cold and lonely night, every scraped knee, every nightmare. And now, I was just an unwanted guest on the most important day of my daughter's life, erased by a single sentence. "I only want to be with the people I love." Well, she might as well have delivered a deep wound to my chest, but I was not going to give her or her mother the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I got into my truck and sat behind the wheel for a while, the keys in the ignition, but without turning them. My hands were still shaking, not from anger, not at first, but from disbelief. I replayed the moment in my head like a movie on a loop, trying to figure out what I had missed. There was something in her voice I should have caught, a look in the preceding months. I knew we were not as close as before, but to lie and say parents were not allowed, that was not distance. It was something deliberate. It was an attempt to remove me from the narrative of her life. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and finally, I turned the key and drove. Not home, just away. I needed air. I needed space to figure out if I had just lost my daughter forever, or if this was some cruel phase of twisted independence. Hours later, I ended up parked in front of an old diner where I used to take Kelsey when she was little. The windows were still coated in grease, and the same dusty jukebox sat in the corner where she had once spilled her milkshake and cried until the waitress brought her another one for free. Back then, she would sit right beside me, not across from me, clinging as if the world was too big unless I anchored her. Now, I was alone, watching the cars go by, wondering how the girl I had raised could look at me with such contempt. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, brought me some coffee and asked if I was okay. I gave her a forced smile and told her, "Just a long day." She nodded as if she had heard that before and patted my hand. That small gesture almost broke me. I did not go to the graduation dinner. I did not even look at my phone. I turned it off completely, terrified of seeing a photo online, a perfectly posed picture of my daughter between her mother and her stepfather. Champagne glasses raised, smiles too wide, too proud. I did not want to see them taking credit for a daughter they had not raised. I did not want to hear her friends saying things like, "You must be so proud," or "You did a great job," because they did not do it. I did. I had taken the blows, the fears, the sleepless nights. I had rightfully earned that front row seat more than anyone, but somehow, I was the one left standing outside. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating violently on the nightstand. At first, I ignored it, burying my face in the pillow, but it would not stop. Call after call, message after message, I finally sat up and picked it up. 12 missed calls from Kelsey, 2 voicemails, a handful of texts, all in all caps. My stomach tied in knots. I pressed play on the first message. She was crying. "Dad, please, I do not know what happened. The scholarship, they said the funding is gone. I do not understand. You said it was secured. Do you remember? You said it was covered. I already signed the housing lease. I do not have anyone else who can help me. Please, call me back, please." My heart did not race. It was not even moved. I just sat there listening to her panic, and I felt something inside me settle, not out of satisfaction, but out of clarity. The same girl who had said she only wanted the people she loved was now calling the man she had pushed away barely a few hours earlier because she needed something. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel obligated to run and save her. I called her back, and she answered on the first ring. "Dad," she said breathlessly, "I am so sorry about yesterday. I did not mean it like that. I was overwhelmed. You know how Mom is. She wanted it to be a family moment. I did not know how to say no." Her words spilled out fast, rehearsed. "Please, I need to know what is going on with the scholarship," she said. "It is gone. I cannot afford the program without it." I waited. I let the silence stretch out. Then I said calmly, "Kelsey, I know. I am the sponsor. That scholarship came from me." Her breathing stopped. "What? Wait, what?" I set it up quietly. "I paid the first installment. You did not know because I wanted it to be a surprise, a gift, something to show you that I believed in you. But yesterday, I exhaled slowly. Yesterday, you told me you only wanted to be with the people you loved, and clearly, I was not one of them." "Dad, come on," she whispered. "You said it," I replied. "And that is fine. You are an adult now. You can choose whoever you want, but so can I. And I am done being the person you only come back to when you need something. But you are my dad." "I am," I said, "and I always will be, but I am not your doormat." There was silence on the other end, then a small, muffled sob. "I made a mistake." "We all make them," I said. "But some mistakes have consequences. Maybe your mother or your stepfather can help you now. After all, you said they are the ones you love." And then, for the first time in years, I hung up the phone, not out of spite, but for peace. The silence that followed that call was not peaceful. It was sharp, like a shard of glass buried under the skin, subtle but always there. For the first time in years, my phone was not vibrating with a "good morning" or a casual "can you lend me some money for books?" The silence was a strange kind of relief, but also a reminder that something permanent had changed. I had drawn a line, and not the kind that invites negotiation or compromise. It was the kind etched in concrete when you are tired of pretending that pain is just a side effect of love. I knew what I had said to her was not cruel, but it was final, and final things often echo louder than we want them to. I kept wondering if she understood the gravity of my words, or if she was still replaying the moment like I was, trying to paint herself as the victim of a man who had finally decided to stop letting himself be taken for granted. 2 days passed before I heard from her again. This time with no tears, no apologies, just a text message. "You really meant it, did not you?" That was it. No greeting, no punctuation, just a cold, flat sentence. I stared at it for a long time, unsure how to reply. I had meant it. Every syllable. But what do you say to your daughter when the distance between you has stopped being circumstantial and has become ideological? I did not want to argue. I did not want to beg for her understanding. So, I replied with a single word. "Yes." She did not respond. I stood there with the phone in my hand, staring at the screen as if it might light up again, but nothing happened. That is when the guilt began to seep in, not because I thought I was wrong, but because some ancestral part of my fatherhood still wanted to save her, even now, even after everything. Later that night, my sister Diane called me. She had heard something on Facebook, probably from Kelsey's mother, who always had a flair for drama and public sympathy campaigns. "What is going on?" she asked, skipping all pleasantries. Kelsey said you cut her off. After everything, I took a deep breath. Did she tell you what she said to me at graduation? Diane hesitated. No, she just said you left and then told her to ask her stepfather for tuition money, that you were punishing her. I scoffed. Not at Diane, but at the predictability of the narrative that had taken hold. She told me, in front of her mother and her stepfather, that she only wanted to be with the people she loved. She lied to keep me out of the ceremony. She lied, and then she had the nerve to ask me for money the next morning. Tell me, who is punishing whom? Diane sighed. She was not a mother, but she had been close enough to understand the history. You know, in some ways, she is still a kid. She does not understand the damage she is doing. That was the problem. I was no longer so sure I believed that. Kelsey was 23 years old enough to file her taxes, sign a lease, and craft a sentence designed to cut the man who raised her out of her life. If she is adult enough to choose who she loves, I said slowly, she is adult enough to face the consequences of her choices. Diane did not argue, but I could feel that she wanted to. We said goodbye in that awkward way people do when they are not sure whose side they are on. I hung up feeling more isolated than ever. The next morning, I woke up to a new voicemail. It was not Kelsey. It was her stepfather, Scott. I had never spoken to this man in my life. I had never met him. I only knew he had entered Kelsey's life after her mother remarried in California. His voice was low, measured, overly polite. Hello, this is Scott. I wanted to reach out man to man. I know there is some tension right now, but I believe we can resolve this. Kelsey's future is too important to let misunderstandings get in the way. Maybe we can talk. I replayed the message 3 times. Each time, I felt more insulted by man to man. What did he think this was? A business negotiation? An office dispute over a lost invoice? I was not some distant relative with a checkbook. I was her father. I had earned that title with every sleepless night and every dollar I scraped together to keep her life stable. I did not owe him a conversation, not after what he had allowed at that graduation. Yet, I considered calling him back. For a second, I imagined being the bigger person, taking the high road. But then I remembered Kelsey's face, that arrogant, annoyed expression when she saw me sitting among the parents. I remembered those exact words, the coldness in her tone. This is my happy day, and I only want to be with the people I love. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a declaration. And if Scott and her mother were the ones she had chosen to love, then let them figure out how to pay for her future. I was not going to be the emergency wallet she ran to after burning the bridge. The hardest part was not ignoring her. It was living in the echo of everything I had once meant to her. I would walk past her room, the one I had kept completely intact since she left for college, and I would see the old concert tickets on her corkboard, the framed photo of us at her 8th grade science fair. I would find birthday cards she had drawn in crayon, tucked away in drawers I had not opened in years. The best dad. Thank you for loving me when no one else did. I held those cards in my hands as if they were artifacts from a lost civilization. Proof that I had once been enough, more than enough. I had not changed. I had not failed. She had simply moved on, or perhaps she had rewritten history in her head to make it easier to ignore what I had done for her. People do that sometimes, especially when they need to feel justified in pushing you away. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the porch with the scholarship paperwork. I read it line by line, as if it were a will. I had been ready to give her something that could have changed her life. Now, it was nothing more than a reminder of how far I was willing to go for someone who no longer saw me. I did not cry. I did not get angry. I just sat in the dark with the quiet hum of crickets around me and let the weight of the decision settle like dust. I had not abandoned her. I had simply stopped volunteering to be invisible. It was the voicemail that finally shattered the fragile layer of detachment I was clinging to. Not Kelsey's tears, not her stepfather's polite attempt at diplomacy, but her mother's voice. I had not heard from her in years, not since she sent me the divorce papers with the custody arrangement and then vanished into a new life with her real estate license and her shiny ring. But suddenly, there she was in my voicemail, with a sharp tone of entitlement that made my blood boil before I even got halfway through her message. You made your position abundantly clear, she said. But this is not about you. It is about our daughter, and you sabotaging her future just because your pride was hurt is disgusting. Grow up, Brian. That was it. No context, just a condescending jab meant to pierce whatever fatherhood was left in my chest. And for a second, just 1 second, she succeeded. I stared at the wall, that message repeating over and over in my head, and it took everything in me not to lose my temper completely. Not because of those words, but because of the revisionist history they represented. Our daughter? Since when? Where was this hour when Kelsey had a fever of 104 degrees and I slept sitting on the floor next to her bed, checking her temperature every hour because we did not have good health insurance? Where was this hour when I had to leave her at the shop after school because I could not afford daycare, and her mother would not even return my calls? The audacity of this woman to speak as if I were just a bitter ex throwing a tantrum. I was not punishing Kelsey. I was pulling myself out of a cycle of manipulation where my love was only welcome when it came with a check. I really wanted to let it go. I wanted to be the bigger person, let those words slide off my back, and pretend nothing mattered. But some truths demand to be spoken. So I called her back. Not to argue, not to fight, just to remind her who she was talking to. When she answered, her voice already sounded sharp and impatient. So, you finally decided to stop sulking. I ignored the provocation. You do not get to rewrite history, Monica, I said calmly. You left. You abandoned her. You sent late birthday gifts and called from beaches while I worked night shifts trying to keep the lights on. Do not call me now with this fake moral superiority just because she is an adult and useful for your image. She scoffed. You think this is about image? I cut her off. I think it is about convenience. You were a ghost until she started posting pictures with you on Instagram. And now, suddenly, you are Mother of the Year. There was a long silence, the kind that usually ends with an apology or a declaration of war. Monica chose the latter. You are full of resentment because she is closer to us now. She loves Scott. She respects him. I almost laughed. She does not respect him. She uses him just like she used me. Except she is smart enough to keep everything polite because she still needs something from you. That struck a nerve. I heard it in her breathing. You are a petty little man, she spat. I did not back down. My voice was firm. I am a father who finally realized that unconditional love does not mean unconditional access. And I hung up. I sat in the living room after that, hands trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had not spoken to Monica like that in over a decade. Not because I was afraid, but because I thought staying silent was the mature thing to do, that if I kept my mouth shut, somehow, I could protect Kelsey from the fallout. But protecting her had only allowed this alternate version of reality to exist, one where her mother was a misunderstood saint, and I was the grumpy, inflexible father who could not let go. I had spent years letting people take from me, my money, my time, my credit, my emotional energy, because I believed that made me a good father, but I was no longer so sure. Maybe a good father also knows when to stop letting himself be used. 2 days later, the rumors started, subtle at first, mutual friends sending vague messages like, "Hey, just wanted to check how you are doing," or, "I heard there is some tension with Kelsey." Then came the real deal, screenshots of Monica's social media post, a long, theatrical paragraph about how hard co-parenting is when one parent weaponizes finances and guilt, followed by dozens of sympathetic comments from people who had no idea what they were talking about. One woman even wrote, "I am so sorry you have to deal with this. You are such a strong mother." I wanted to reply. I wanted to flood the comments with receipts, dates, and pictures of Kelsey in my arms while Monica was at the beach with her new husband. But I did not, because that was exactly what they expected. Just another man breaking down in public while the women played the martyr. No, I had already made my point perfectly clear. The only people who needed to understand it were the ones who had seen my life firsthand. Then came Kelsey's email, long, carefully worded, clearly written and rewritten until it sounded polite but devoid of emotion. She wrote that she was hurt by my decision, that she had never meant to exclude me, but that I had overreacted and was now putting her future at risk over a misunderstanding. She never really apologized. She said things like, "I am sorry you felt hurt," which is a far cry from, "I am sorry for what I did." She framed everything as if it were just a clumsy mistake, not a calculated decision to erase me from a moment I had earned through years of devotion. The most telling part was at the end, when she wrote, "I just hope you can get past this. I still need your help." That was the final blow, because it was not a plea for love. It was a demand to keep relying on my support. Not, I love you. Not, I miss you. Just, I still need your help. And right there, I understood. I was no longer her father. I was a sponsor, a shadow investor in the brand of her success. And now that I had stopped signing the checks, she was sending formal appeals as if I were the human resources department of her life. I closed the email without replying. I did not even archive it. I wanted it sitting there in my inbox, unread, as a reminder that clarity sometimes comes wrapped in the ugliest paper. Later that week, my neighbor George came to visit. He was in his 60s, retired, sharp, and perceptive. He had watched Kelsey grow up from his porch. He had seen me scraping ice off the windshield at 5 in the morning to get her to school on time. We were sitting on my porch when he said to me, "You are taking it hard, huh?" I nodded. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and said, "You know, my daughter did not speak to me for 5 years after I told her no on a down payment. 5 years. She came back with a son and an apology. It took her all that time to understand the value of what I had given her. Sometimes love is not meant to be easy. It is meant to be real." That stuck with me, not because it made me feel better, but because it reminded me that I was not alone, that maybe the love I had given was not invisible, just uncomfortable to acknowledge until its cost was felt. The strange thing about silence is how loud it gets when you stop fighting it. After the emails, the voicemails, the emotional manipulation from Kelsey, Monica, and even Scott, everything just stopped. No new calls, no fresh accusations, no casual texts. My phone went back to being a simple block of plastic, and I was left with the echo of what was once a relationship. At first, it felt peaceful, as if I could finally breathe. But breathing too deeply after years of suffocation can make your chest ache in unexpected ways. I found myself checking my phone out of habit, half expecting another emotional landmine hidden in my notifications. But there was nothing, just the date, the time, and my reflection in the black screen. Older than I remembered, lonelier than I wanted to admit. And that is when the real weight dropped. Not anger, not even betrayal, just the lingering absence of someone I once knew better than myself. Some nights, I would walk into Kelsey's old room and just stand there. I never touched anything. I did not need to. Every corner was a museum of a time when she still saw me as her whole world. Her bookshelf still held the worn copy of Charlotte's Web I used to read to her every night. The unicorn lamp I bought at a garage sale was still sitting crookedly on her desk. The mirror was framed with Polaroids from high school dances, birthday slumber parties, and family barbecues. Pictures where she posed right beside me, smiling without hesitation. That girl felt like a dream I had woken up from too soon. It was hard to believe she had become the woman capable of looking me in the eye and telling me I did not belong at her graduation. I was not angry when I stood in her room, just empty, as if I had spent 2 decades building a cathedral, only for her to burn the blueprints and move into a house someone else had bought her. I started getting strange looks at the grocery store. Nothing obvious, just those subtle glances from people who had read something online or heard gossip in a group chat. I knew Monica's social media post had circulated. Acquaintances who had not spoken to me in years were suddenly liking old photos or sending vague messages. One woman, a former co-worker of Monica's, even wrote to me, "I just want you to know I see what you are going through. Stay strong." What did that even mean? I did not reply. I did not need pity, let alone from strangers who only knew an edited version of my life through the selfish lens of someone else. If they wanted to believe I was the villain, let them. I had no interest in defending myself to people who were not there when Kelsey was throwing up at midnight, too sick to even call an ambulance. If they were not there then, they did not have a seat at the judgment table now. But someone did show up unexpectedly, and right when I needed it. Ms. Reynolds, Kelsey's 8th grade teacher, knocked on my door on a Saturday afternoon with a Tupperware full of lemon bars and that same warm smile I remembered from parent-teacher conferences. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, even though we both knew that was a lie. She lived 45 minutes away. I invited her in, and we sat at the kitchen table as if it were 2012 again, talking about Kelsey's science project. "I have been following everything," she said softly, without needing to explain what she was referring to. "I just wanted to tell you something." I nodded in silence. She looked me straight in the eye. "She loved you so much, Brian. I have taught hundreds of kids, and I always knew which ones had real support at home. Kelsey was one of the lucky ones. Do not let her rewrite that. That meant more than I can explain. Not because I needed validation, but because I needed someone objective, to say out loud that I had not imagined the bond we once shared, that it was not just me clinging to an illusion. She told me about the time Kelsey wrote an essay titled My Hero, and it was all about me. She read it out loud in class. Ms. Reynolds said with tears in her eyes. She wrote, "My dad is my best friend, even when I am mad at him." I swallowed hard and blinked back the tears. That was the Kelsey I remembered, the one who said, "We are a team," when things got tough, the one who held my hand during thunderstorms and whispered, "Always." That girl had not disappeared. She had just forgotten. After Ms. Reynolds left, I sat back out on the porch with a lemon bar in hand, staring into space. I thought about how love changes, how sometimes it stretches and bends to fit new versions of people, and other times it shatters completely, leaving you holding the pieces like parts of a puzzle for a picture that no longer exists. I was not naive. I knew people grow up, make mistakes, drift apart, but this felt different. It felt like being erased from a book I had written myself, painful chapter by painful chapter. It was not that Kelsey did not need me anymore. It was that she did not want me anymore. And that realization does not just knock the wind out of you. It rips it away completely. So you just stand there with lungs full of memories, unable to exhale. I thought about writing to her just once, not to reopen the wound, but to remind her who I was. I typed the message a dozen times. "I am still proud of you, even if you forgot what we went through." Deleted. "I hope you get everything you want in life, including clarity." Deleted. "If you ever remember who held you up when your world was falling apart, you know where I live." Deleted. Nothing sounded right. Nothing felt both honest and respectful of the boundary I had so painfully drawn. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done as a father. I locked the phone and left it there. That night, I pulled the scholarship folder out of the drawer again, not to reconsider it, but to let it go. I burned it in the fireplace page by page, the acceptance letter, the payment receipt, the confirmation email. Watching the flames devour all the things I had hoped to give her was strangely liberating. Painful, yes, but clean. I was no longer clinging to dreams. I was letting reality settle in, and that reality was this. Sometimes the people we love become someone who does not love us back in the same way. And that does not mean we failed. It just means they chose something or someone else. And all we can do is stand still and refuse to chase them. The weeks turned into a sort of quiet normalcy. I went back to work at the shop. I picked up Saturday shifts again, more to fill the hours than anything else. The guys did not ask questions, even though I could feel that they knew something had changed. I was not the same anymore. The spark that used to light up when someone brought in a blown engine or when a teenager asked how to change their oil was gone. I moved slower. I talked less. I ate lunch in my truck instead of the break room. They left me alone, which I appreciated. There is something sacred in a man's silence when his heart has been broken, especially when the people around him know better than to try and fix it with advice or jokes. Some wounds are not meant to be stitched up. They have to stay open until the air stings enough for the healing to begin on its own. I stopped checking my phone altogether, not out of defiance, but because I did not want to keep waiting for a message that was never going to come. Kelsey had not reached out since that last email. No follow-up, no apology, no casual texts, just an absence that felt intentional, and that, in a way, made it easier to keep going. Her silence was not a cry for attention or even confusion. It was a choice. She had decided to live her life without the man who used to braid her hair and spend all night searching online how to build her a homemade volcano for science class. That truth hurt less the more I repeated it. Some mornings, I would wake up and whisper it in front of the bathroom mirror. She made her choice, and so did I. Over time, it became my anthem. Not out of anger, but out of survival. My neighbor George came over on a Sunday again, this time with 2 beers instead of his usual cigarette. "I figured you could use one," he said, handing it to me without asking. We sat on the porch in silence for a while, watching the squirrels chase each other across the power lines. Finally, he said, "You know, you remind me a lot of my brother." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" He gave a pained laugh. He raised his stepson for 15 years. He paid for his braces, his football camps, his prom tuxedos, everything. The boy got a full ride to college and did not even mention him in the graduation speech. He thanked his real dad instead. It tore my brother in half. I listened, feeling the burn of familiarity creeping up my spine. "And what happened?" I asked. George took a long sip and then said, "He let him go. The hardest thing he ever did in his life." But years later, the boy came back. He said he had grown up, that he realized who had really been there for him. I wanted to believe that was possible, but I also knew not all stories end that way. That afternoon, I sat down with a journal Kelsey had given me for my birthday when she was 12. It was wrapped in shiny paper, and inside the cover, she had written, "For Dad. So you can finally write about yourself instead of just fixing other people's things." I had never used it once. I always said I was too busy, that writing was not my thing. But now, sitting in the soft light of the living room, I opened to the first blank page and picked up a pen. And for the first time, I wrote, not about her, not about Monica, but about me. About who I was before I became someone's father, about the dreams I once had, about the things I had lost, and the things I had found in the process of raising a child alone. I wrote about the sacrifices, yes, but also about the pride, the quiet victories, the private joys of watching her become someone brilliant, even if that brilliance no longer had room for me. And as the ink glided across the page, I felt something loosen in my chest. I realized that part of my pain came not just from losing her, but from losing the identity I had built around being her father. For years, every decision I made passed through the filter of fatherhood. What am I giving? What does she need from me? How can I make her life easier? That purpose had anchored me through every storm, and now without it, I was adrift. But maybe that was not a tragedy. Maybe it was an invitation. An invitation to discover who I was outside the role I had played, to be a man again, not just a father, to explore the parts of me that had fallen asleep while I carried someone else's future on my back. That week, I booked a short trip, just a cabin up north near the lake. Nothing fancy. I packed some books, my old fishing rod, and that journal. I did not tell anyone where I was going, no announcements, no social media posts, just me, finally choosing myself. After decades of choosing everyone else, I spent the days reading, fishing, and sleeping without an alarm. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful, healing. One morning, I stood barefoot on the dock as the sun came up and said out loud, to no one in particular, I did my job. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but with everything I had, and that is what matters. I was not walking away from Kelsey. I was releasing the version of her I had clung to. The little girl who once looked at me like I was her entire world. That version did not exist anymore, and it was time to honor it with grace, not bitterness. When I got back, there was a single envelope in the mailbox with no return address. Inside, there was a card. No apologies, no explanation, just a printed quote. Sometimes the hardest part is not letting go, but learning to start over. It was not signed, but the handwriting on the envelope was hers. I did not cry. I did not rush to reply. I just put it on the fridge and walked away. Maybe it was a gesture of peace, maybe just guilt. I did not need to decipher it. The only thing I needed was to remember that I was still standing. I was still whole. I was still worthy of love, even if it no longer came from the person I had raised. Comment. This story really stayed with me. It reminded me how important it is to protect our own self-respect. Sometimes, the healthiest choice is setting firm boundaries, even when it hurts. I hope this encourages you to value your peace more than anything else. You deserve relationships where your love and effort are truly seen. Healing often begins the moment we decide to stop chasing acceptance. Taking responsibility for your own happiness is a powerful step forward. Be kind to yourself as you navigate these emotions. Choosing peace is not giving up. It is choosing yourself. I believe you have the strength to create healthier chapters in your life. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.